My name is Emily Dawson, and the day my sister got married, I became invisible. It wasn't a grand moment or some dramatic confrontation. No, it was quieter than that. It was in the subtle turn of a head, the way someone's gaze passed through you, like sunlight through glass. His name was Richard Caldwell, father of the groom and CEO of a national logistics empire. When I walked into that country club reception hall, he gave me a glance that didn't register. Just a polite nod, eyes already drifting past my shoulder like I wasn't even there. I was dressed well, a dark navy dress, heels I hated, and hair I had pinned back too tightly. My posture was right. My manners are intact. But none of that mattered. I wasn't who he expected. Not important. Not impressive. Not worth remembering. He didn't know me. Not really. He didn't know that the company, his enterprise, depended daily, the very system that ran his warehouse coordination and inventory syncs, was built by the same woman he had just ghosted in person. I co-founded it, brick by digital brick. And for the last 6 months, he'd been emailing my team pressing to buy us out. Always with that condescending tone, like he was offering us a favor instead of a deal. I watched him at the reception, mingling with city officials and bankers, a glass of red wine never far from his hand. He wore his last name like a crown. Caldwell. A name stamped on distribution centers across 5 states. He probably thought it gave him the right to weigh the worth of every person in the room like merchandise. And to him, I was unbranded goods. That was fine. Because what Richard didn't realize, what he couldn't possibly know, is that everything he took for granted was balanced on systems I had helped create, nights I had burned through, tears I had swallowed. Still, I stayed quiet. Let the evening roll on. My sister Rachel looked radiant. I had walked her down the aisle just 2 hours earlier, my arm hooked through hers as her eyes shimmered with tears. She squeezed my hand so tightly I thought it might bruise, but I didn't say a word. Just smiled and whispered, "You've got this." And she did. She deserved this. She deserved joy after everything we went through. So I didn't make a scene. I didn't correct anyone when they assumed I was just the maid of honor or just the sister. I drank water from the bar and slipped in and out of small talk like I belonged somewhere just outside the frame. But that was about to change, because fate has a strange sense of humor. When the catering manager tapped my shoulder and said, "You're up next for a speech," I blinked like she'd spoken in code. "A speech?" I asked. "Yes, you're listed right before the best man." I hadn't planned this. My name wasn't on the program, but someone, probably Rachel, had made a quiet addition. And now the mic was waiting. The lights had dimmed. The music faded out. And suddenly, I found myself walking toward the front of the hall, the soles of my heels whispering across polished wood. I passed Richard Caldwell on the way. He didn't even flinch, didn't turn, still thought I was no one. Perfect. I took the microphone and exhaled slowly. My fingers didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I was. My name is Emily Dawson. I'm Rachel's sister. That got her attention. Silverware paused, glasses lowered. I continued. After our father died, suddenly, I became her guardian. I was 19. She was 17. There was no one else. I was in my final semester of college when it happened. One phone call, and everything changed. Our mother had been gone for years. It was just the two of us. I could see Rachel's eyes welling already. I worked mornings in a coffee shop, nights as a delivery runner. Slept 4 hours maybe. Lost a few friends. Lost someone I loved. But I promised myself one thing: she would never feel abandoned. I let that hang in the silence. She got into college. I paid every tuition bill, every rent check, every emergency, and I kept going. Eventually, I helped build something, a tech platform. Nothing flashy. But some of you here tonight use it every day. That line caused a shift. Heads turned, whispers stirred, and while I never cared for applause, I've always cared about this, seeing my sister safe, seeing her happy. So when she told me she was getting married, I didn't hesitate. I only asked one thing: that she be loved well. I looked at Rachel, then at her new husband, Jason Caldwell. "You're good to her," I said. "And that means everything to me." I stepped down from the stage. The applause was genuine, and as I passed Richard Caldwell again, I watched the color drain from his face. Because now, finally, he knew exactly who I was. I didn't always speak with that kind of calm. There was a time when my voice cracked every time I had to ask for help. A time when I measured the price of groceries in heartbeats. A time when I wasn't Emily Dawson, the poised woman in a navy dress at her sister's wedding, but just Em. A 22-year-old girl trying to look grown up in borrowed shoes, clutching a too-thin coat, and the ashes of a world that had ended overnight. It was the week after spring finals. I had just finished my last exam when my phone rang at 4:12 p.m. I remember the time because it wasn't a time anyone should be calling with bad news. It was Professor Leeds, my college advisor. She didn't sound like herself. "Emily," she said, "there's been an accident. Your father, he didn't make it." I sat down on the floor right there in the hallway of the student union, just folded. My legs stopped listening. Our dad, Thomas Dawson, had been planning to visit. He was going to bring my little sister Rachel to see the campus. She was 17, nearly done with high school. It was meant to be a surprise. He always liked those. But that morning, he never made it past the off-ramp on I-80. Wet road. Jackknifed semi. Gone. Just like that. There was no time to grieve, not really. I drove home to Omaha the next day. Rachel met me at the front door with wide eyes and a trembling chin. She looked like she'd been holding her breath since someone told her. I wrapped her in my arms and realized, really truly realized, that there was no one else. Our mother had left years before, started over in Arizona with a new husband, new kids, and a carefully sanitized past. She sent a bouquet to the funeral. No card, no call, just flowers. So it was just me and Rachel, two girls in a house that no longer felt like home. The funeral was a blur. Half-finished casseroles and awkward condolences. But after everyone left and the door finally clicked shut, I sat on the floor beside her in that empty living room and knew I was it. I was the last adult standing, and we were in trouble. Dad had been self-employed, running a small auto repair business out of our garage. I thought we were okay. But grief has a cruel companion reality. The bills came first, then the bank notices, then the repossession agents. Debt we didn't know existed began closing in from every side. It turned out Dad had been holding the walls up, with his bare hands shielding us from a storm he never mentioned. They took everything: the house, the shop, the van. All we had left was the duffel bag I had brought home from school. My scholarship covered tuition, thank God. But not rent, not food, not Rachel's senior year, not her dreams of college. That night, she curled up on the floor in one of Dad's flannels, crying so softly I could barely hear it. I made a decision then, not with fanfare, not with grand vows, but in the marrow of my bones. I would not let her drown. I took every job I could find. Mornings, I worked the counter at Java Junction near campus. Evenings, I ran packages for a local courier service, hauling awkward boxes up endless flights of stairs. I studied between shifts. My grades slipped, but not too far. I couldn't afford failure. Not when she needed me. I slept in 3-hour bursts, ate from vending machines, lost 10 pounds without meaning to. When my roommate graduated early and left, I moved into a basement studio and paid half in cash, half in favors. I kept my phone charged for Rachel's calls. She cried often, but not once did she ask me to come home. She knew I already had. Somewhere along the way, my boyfriend Derek drifted away. He tried, he did, but I kept missing dates. kept answering with silence. When he finally said, "I just can't keep waiting for you," I didn't fight him. "I know," I said. "I wouldn't wait for me either." I didn't have time for heartbreak. I had Rachel's college fund to build. My future, I could worry about that later. Right now, survival comes first. After I graduated without the cap toss, without the photos, I took the first offer that came, a logistics firm in Des Moines. Back-end operations. Not glamorous, but it paid. I moved us into a one-bedroom walk-up on the east side. Rachel took the room. I took the pull-out couch. I made dinner every night, even if dinner was just rice and eggs. On weekends, I napped in short bursts and watched reruns with Rachel. I kept things light. Tried not to let her see the weight in my eyes. She was so bright, so full of potential. I didn't want her to carry my weariness. I never stopped learning. Late nights, I enrolled in online courses, project management, business analytics, and cloud operations. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I knew something would come. It had to. I couldn't keep living paycheck to paycheck, praying the car wouldn't break down again. Then, one Thursday night, a message popped up from Logan Pierce, an old friend from my macroeconomics class. He remembered the way I used to map business models on napkins. He wrote, "I've got something brewing. Need someone smart with operations. Are you interested?" It sounded crazy. A tech tool to streamline vendor coordination and workflow automation. No funding, no office. Just big ideas and a shared Google Drive. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before replying. "When do we start?" That's how it began. Double life. Day job from 8 to 5. Startup from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. I took meetings from coffee shops, wrote code from the bus, and sketched user flows on the backs of receipts. Logan handled the front-end architecture. I ran customer support systems, integration, and back-end logistics. Some nights, I fell asleep with my laptop still glowing a ramen cup by my elbow. We called it Threadline. At first, it was just us and another guy, Peter, who left after 6 brutal months with 0 clients and a server crash that wiped half our data. But Logan and I stuck it out. Eventually, we got a pilot test with a mid-size e-commerce company. We cut their order delays by 38%. Then they told their partners, and their partners told theirs. Soon we were flooded with demo requests and onboarding calls. No VCs, no fast exits, just slow, careful growth. And through it all, Rachel never stopped believing in me. She never stopped saying, "You've got this, Em." She was wrong about a lot of things, but not that. I still remember the day I realized we were no longer surviving, we were finally building. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished responding to our 73rd support ticket of the day when Logan messaged me. "We just signed Reynolds Global. 3-year license. 6 figures annually." I stared at the screen, blinking. Reynolds was a whale. A logistics giant with its own internal IT army, and they wanted our platform. Threadline. Our platform. I didn't scream, didn't cry. Just sat there in my worn-out desk chair feeling this strange weightlessness like I was finally coming up for air after years underwater. Rachel was the first person I told. "I knew you'd do it," she said, her voice warm with that unshakable faith she always seemed to have in me. "I never doubted you. That made one of us." Our apartment had grown with us. We moved into a 2-bedroom in a newer building, and for the first time I had a real bed. Rachel's tuition was covered. She got braces. I bought her a car used, scratched and stubborn, but hers, ours. I kept working the day job for another 8 months, even after we brought on 4 full-time clients. I wanted a cushion. I wanted to be sure. But the moment came quiet and undeniable when Threadline paid for itself and then some, so I left. Just walked out of that office on the 15th floor with my mug and my file box and a spine that finally felt straight. Logan became the face of the company. He liked the attention. TEDx talks, podcasts, tech panels. That suited him. I preferred to stay behind the scenes. Operations, strategy, systems, the invisible hands that made everything work. Some people chased clout. I chased peace. And that's what Threadline gave me. We didn't take funding. We didn't chase fast exits or bloated valuations. We built something lean, responsive, and real, something people needed. And quietly, Richard Caldwell came knocking. Not him personally, not at first. His procurement team reached out under a different name, RC Ops Review, probably trying to mask who they were. But I recognized the language, the approach. Eventually, he made his interest known, emailing Logan directly with an offer to buy us out. The number was big, the kind of number that makes most people say yes without blinking. But I read between the lines. His interest wasn't rooted in admiration. It was rooted in acquisition. He wanted to own the thing he couldn't build himself. Not a partner, not invest, own, control. I said no. 3 times. He didn't take it well. That's when he started pressuring. Subtle digs. Don't miss your window, he wrote in one email. Markets shift. Timing is everything. I ignored him. So did Logan. We weren't building to sell. We were building to serve our clients, our vision, our people. What made it ironic was what happened next. Rachel called one Friday evening. I had just collapsed on the couch, microwaved pasta in one hand, and the Threadline Slack channel open on my laptop. She said, breathless. I have something to tell you. My brain flipped through possibilities, job offer, internship, another grad class. I'm getting married. The fork froze in midair. You're what to Jason, she said quickly, like it would be easier if she rushed through it. We've been dating for almost a year, but I didn't tell you because I didn't know how. Jason. The name was familiar. I'd met him once, quick handshake, passing introduction. I'd thought nothing of it. You're sure? I asked, my voice even, but quiet. I'm sure. I love him, Em. He makes me feel safe. That was all I needed to hear. So we planned a dinner. I offered to cook. Jason showed up that Friday with a bottle of wine and a nervous grin. He was polite, clean-cut, maybe a little too polished. But he adored Rachel. That part was obvious. It wasn't until halfway through the lasagna that his last name came up. Caldwell. I repeated the syllables, clicking together like a code I'd just cracked. Any relation to Richard Caldwell? Jason hesitated for the briefest moment, then nodded. He's my father. I set down my fork slowly. Everything snapped into place. This was the man behind the emails. Behind the acquisition offers, the power plays, the polished tone of entitlement. And now I was sitting across from his son. I didn't flinch. Didn't change expression. That's interesting, I said, neutral. Jason looked uncomfortable. He can be intense. I try to stay out of the business stuff. Rachel shot me a worried glance. He's not his dad, Em, I promise. Later that night, as we washed dishes in the kitchen, she pulled me aside. You went quiet for a while there, she said. I'm just surprised, I admitted. You think he's a good man? She nodded. He's not trying to impress anyone. He just shows up. And he listens. That's all I ever wanted. I looked at her for a long moment. She wasn't pleading. She was glowing. And Rachel didn't glow easily. Then I'm in your corner, I said. And I meant it. Wedding planning took over her life in the weeks that followed. I offered to help, but kept my distance from the big events, taste tests, floral mock-ups, gown fittings. I was there for what mattered, and I stayed out of the spotlight. As usual, then came the family meet and greet. It was held at a country club in the heart of Cincinnati White Linen's valet parking, and that quiet money energy that people wear like perfume. I wore my navy dress and my calmest expression. When I walked into the room, Richard Caldwell's eyes landed on me instantly. He did a full once-over shoes dress posture and then dismissed me without a word. When we were introduced, he offered a limp handshake and said, "Oh, you're her sister. I assumed her father would be here." Our father passed away a long time ago, I said evenly. He gave a vague nod and turned away. Later, he circled back with the question I'd been waiting for. And what is it that you do again? That investor sniff hunting for pedigree. Operations, I said simply. True. But not the whole truth. He didn't bother to follow up. Didn't ask where or for whom. He just moved on. And I let him. But as I walked away, a quiet voice inside me whispered, "You're going to regret that." The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the hotel AC filling the silence. My thoughts churned like a storm, memories, colliding with anticipation, names intertwining with headlines. Jason Caldwell, Richard Caldwell, Rachel Dawson. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment at the meet and greet. The way Richard Caldwell looked through me like glass. The way he asked what I did with the same tone one might use to ask the breed of someone's dog. Operations, I had said. He didn't even blink. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a habit. Men like him had spent decades practicing the art of erasing people without ever raising their voice. But he was about to find out. The wedding day arrived warm and cloudless. Rachel looked ethereal in her ivory gown, her dark curls pinned back with tiny silver clips that sparkled like stars. She gripped my hand before the doors opened. "You ready?" I asked. She nodded, eyes brimming. "You?" I smiled. "Always." I walked her down the aisle with all the steadiness I had learned in 10 years of carrying the weight of both our futures. My heels clicked slowly and sure on the stone pathway. Jason stood at the end, hands clasped, tight eyes fixed on her like nothing else existed. For the first time, I truly believed he loved her. The ceremony was beautiful, simple, honest. Rachel's vows made me cry quietly behind my folded hands. At the reception, I stayed in the background. That was my comfort zone. I made conversation with a few guests, clinked glasses when appropriate, and slipped out to answer a Threadline support issue that popped up during cocktail hour. Still, I noticed Richard. He floated through the crowd like a man who always owned the room. Crisp gray suit, polished shoes, laughter that made people lean in. I caught him looking at me once from across the dance floor, but his gaze didn't stick. No flicker of recognition, no second glance. I wasn't in his world, until I was. I didn't know who had added me to the list of speakers. My name wasn't on the program. I hadn't prepared anything. But a young woman in a black vest tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're up next, speech time." I blinked. There must be a mistake. "Nope," she said, smiling. "You're after the best man." Panic flared for a moment. My hands went cold. I wasn't a public speaker. I didn't like stages or microphones or eyes all turning at once. But then I looked across the room and saw Rachel. She was laughing at something. Jason whispered, her face full of light I hadn't seen since we were kids, before life started taking things away. This was her day, and I had walked every dark mile that led to it. So I stood up, walked to the mic, and I told the truth. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear. "My name is Emily Dawson. I'm Rachel's sister." A soft murmur moved through the tables. I caught sight of Richard, near the bar, his body angled toward me now. "But I wasn't just her sister," I continued. "After our father passed away, I became her guardian. I was 22, she was 17. We had no one else. Our mother had moved on." The crowd quieted. Even the kitchen staff paused behind the buffet line. I was finishing college when it happened. I couldn't afford to fall apart, so I didn't. I worked 2 jobs, took out loans, ate from vending machines, and I did it all for one reason, so Rachel could keep dreaming. I saw her crying already. Her hands were clasped together, knuckles white. She got into college. I paid every bill, every book, every late-night grocery run. I didn't celebrate my graduation, didn't take a vacation. I just worked. I paused. But I wasn't just surviving. I was building. During those years, while taking care of Rachel and working full-time, I helped co-found a tech company. Maybe some of you use our platform. It's called Threadline. That hit harder than I expected. There were whispers, subtle shifts in posture. I saw Logan raise his glass from a back table, eyes smiling. We support dozens of major enterprises, warehousing, logistics, procurement systems. Our team stayed lean. Our code stayed clean. We grew without outside funding. We kept our independence. And we kept our values. I didn't need to name names. The room was already connecting dots. Richard Caldwell's expression shifted. His smile froze. His grip tightened around his wine glass. I didn't come here to talk business, I added. This isn't about what I've built. It's about who I built it. You two found something rare. You found a partnership with grace, laughter. When I'm honored to stand here, not just as participants, but as someone who's had the privilege of watching your hearts grow into this love. The room was quiet. Stand down. Before I could return to Richard Caldwell was suddenly in front of me, like a shadow stepping over the wall. Literally, he said, smiling. That was quite a speech. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. You're the co-founder of Redline, he asked, voice low. Yes, I said calmly. The company your teams have been trying to acquire. His eyes narrowed just a breath. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, I said, meeting his gaze. And that's exactly why I didn't tell you when we met. A beat. He looked rattled. Not publicly, not obviously, but the crack was there. I wanted you to see who I was before you knew what I did, I said. Because who I am doesn't change based on a title. And neither does your treatment of people. He didn't respond, just nodded once slowly. Enjoy the evening, I added, stepping around him. I made my way back to Logan. We clinked glasses silently, and he raised one eyebrow in amusement. But he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The night carried on. Jason danced with Rachel. Rachel glowed. Richard stayed civil. But something in his eyes had changed. He knew now, and it was too late. Richard Caldwell didn't say much to me after that. He kept his distance for the rest of the reception, hovered near the whiskey cart, laughed too hard at stories from his peers, but his eyes drifted toward me more than once. And this time he saw me. Not just my dress or posture. Me. But it didn't matter, because I hadn't spoken for his benefit. I hadn't climbed that stage to prove a point or gain his approval. I had done it for Rachel for the years. She'd looked at me like I was invincible when all I felt was broken. I did it because I wanted her to hear, in front of everyone, the story of how we made it. She deserved to know. And I needed to finally say it out loud. After the reception, as the last of the guests trickled out into the soft Ohio night, I found myself walking the perimeter of the venue, with my heels dangling from one hand and a plastic cup of lemonade in the other. My head ached, but in that calm, quiet way that follows emotional release. Jason found me first. You okay? He asked, slipping his hands into his pockets. Yeah, I said softly. Just decompressing. He nodded and leaned against the stone column beside me. That was one hell of a speech. I had no idea. I shrugged. Most people don't. He turned toward me, his face serious. I know my dad can be difficult. I gave a small smile. That's a diplomatic word for it. Jason chuckled, but there was tension behind it. He's driven, obsessed with control. But I'm not him, Emily. I hope you know that. I do, I said. You love her. That's all I care about. We stood in silence for a moment, the distant sound of laughter drifting from inside. Then he asked, You're not going to sell to him, are you? I looked at him. Number. Because of how he treated you, I shook my head. Because I've learned to trust how people approach you when they think you're small. That's who they are. And I don't do business with people who only respect me after they Google my name. Jason didn't argue. Besides, I added, Threadline's doing just fine. We don't need a buyout. We need space to grow. Our way. He gave me a quiet nod. If he ever crosses the line, I'll deal with him. I smiled. Thanks. But trust me, I've dealt with worse. Back inside, Rachel was still dancing barefoot now, her gown twirling with every spin. She hadn't danced like that in years. Not since the night before our dad's funeral, when we had turned the old radio up in the kitchen and danced until we were both crying and laughing at the same time. That smile, the one she had now, it was new, untethered. Real. That was my reward. That was what I'd fought for. Richard Caldwell never mentioned our conversation again. But over the months that followed, something changed. His emails became more formal, more careful. No more backhanded comments, no more smug offers, just business. Threadline continued to grow. We hired our first real support team, expanded infrastructure, launched a new analytics dashboard. And yes, Caldwell Enterprises still licenses our platform, still filed tickets like everyone else, still relied on us. We kept it professional, efficient, cordial, never personal. Jason never brought it up again either. He respected Rachel's boundaries. Respect mine. Over time, we developed something close to trust. Not instant friendship, but mutual understanding. That was enough. Rachel thrived in marriage. She started teaching again in public school science. She planted a community garden, started a weekend youth mentorship program. The kind of life she'd always dreamed about when we were kids, when she'd draw future lesson plans in colored markers on the backs of cereal boxes. And me, I stayed where I'd always been in the background, but unshakable. People still underestimated me, still mistook me for a personal assistant or a tech support rep. I didn't correct them. Let them guess. Let them realize too late. Because I wasn't chasing applause. I had never been. I chased something quieter, stability, dignity, a future. The truth is, Richard Caldwell's biggest mistake wasn't brushing past me at a wedding. It wasn't the limp handshake or the lazy dismissal. It was assumed that being unseen meant being unimportant. But I've never needed to be seen to matter. Not when I had Rachel. Not when I had a vision. Not when I knew exactly what I'd built with my own two hands. People like Richard only learn your value after they've read your resume. But by then, their respect is too late to mean anything. Real respect, the kind that matters, shows up when you have nothing to offer but your name and your word. That's what I've built my life on. Not noise, not spotlight, but the truth. And for the first time in a very long time, I finally feel like I've come home. Emily Dawson never needed the spotlight. What she needed was purpose, and her sister Rachel gave her that. After the sudden death of their father, Emily put her entire life on pause to raise Rachel and keep them both afloat. She didn't complain. She didn't ask for pity. She simply worked tirelessly, relentlessly to give her sister a future. In doing so, Emily quietly built a tech company that would become essential to some of the biggest logistics firms in the country, including, ironically, the empire of Richard Caldwell, Rachel's future father-in-law. But Richard never looked beyond surface impressions. When he met Emily at a wedding, all he saw was just the sister. And so, with practiced arrogance, he dismissed her. Until she stood up and told her story. With grace and quiet strength, Emily laid bare a life of sacrifice, determination, and vision. The same people who overlooked her now leaned in. Richard turned pale, not because he had lost a deal, but because he had misjudged someone whose strength didn't come from power, but from purpose. In the end, Emily didn't seek revenge. She didn't need vindication. She simply stood tall in the truth of her story, protecting what mattered while letting others scramble to catch up. Because real worth doesn't require validation. It speaks for itself in the quiet, in the steady, in the love that endures when no one is watching. And now, with Rachel thriving, Emily finally knows peace. Not the kind you earn by winning loud battles, but the kind you gain by choosing your dignity every single time. She never needed them to see her. She just needed her sister to smile again. And that finally is enough.